The words carved into the oak tree were still fresh, the bark around them weeping amber sap like tears. "Don't save me!" Each letter cut deep with what looked like a hunting knife, the message stark against the weathered trunk. But it was the woman beneath the tree that made Caleb Thorne rein in his horse, her sobs carrying across the desert silence like a wounded animal's cry. She sat huddled against the massive trunk, her dark dress torn and dusty, her brown hair hanging loose, her round shoulders that shook with each sob. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest town of Bitter Springs, Arizona, finding anyone was unusual. Finding a woman alone in the wilderness, crying beneath a tree marked with such a desperate plea, was impossible to ignore. Caleb had been riding this route between his ranch and the trading post for 15 years, ever since he'd settled in this harsh but beautiful country. He knew every rock formation, every water source, every tree that offered shade in the merciless desert heat. This oak had always been a landmark, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like arthritic fingers. But he'd never seen those words carved there before, and he'd certainly never found anyone seeking shelter beneath its sparse shade. "Ma'am," his voice was quiet, careful not to startle her. Years of living alone had made him economical with words, but something about her desperate posture demanded gentleness. "You hurt?" She looked up with eyes red from crying, her face streaked with dust and tears. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 30, with delicate features that spoke of education and refinement. Not the kind of woman who belonged. Alone, in the Arizona desert. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "just ride on. Pretend you didn't see me." Caleb glanced up at the carved message, then back at her face. Whatever had driven her to this isolated spot, whatever had compelled her to cut those words into the tree, it was eating her alive from the inside. He'd seen that look before in the mirror during the dark months after he'd lost his ranch hand partner to cholera, and questioned whether he had the strength to continue alone. "Can't do that, ma'am. Not in good conscience." He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Name's Caleb Thorne. I've got a ranch about 10 miles south of here." I said, "Don't save me." Her voice cracked on the words. "I meant it. Some people can't be saved, Mr. Thorne. Some people don't deserve it. That's not for you to decide." Caleb approached carefully, noting the way she flinched when he moved too quickly. Someone had hurt her, that much was clear. The question was whether the danger was still hunting her, or if it lived only in her memories now. "What's your name?" She hesitated so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Rose Bennett." The pause before the surname told him it was likely a lie, but he didn't press. People came to the desert for many reasons, and most of them involved running from something. He'd learned not to ask too many questions about a person's past. "Well, Miss Bennett, I've got water in my canteen and some hardtack in my saddlebags. When's the last time you ate?" "I'm not hungry." "That wasn't what I asked." Caleb crouched down beside her, careful to stay just outside arm's reach. "You've been crying long enough to dehydrate yourself, and this heat will finish what the tears started if you don't take some water." Rose looked at him with those red-rimmed eyes, and he saw something flicker across her face. Surprise maybe at being spoken to with simple human kindness instead of suspicion or demands for explanations. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." "Don't need to know. All I see is someone who needs help." Caleb pulled his canteen from his belt and offered it to her. "Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from, it can wait until you're not dying of thirst." She accepted the canteen with trembling hands and drank deeply, water spilling down her chin in her eagerness. When she finally stopped, gasping, Caleb could see she'd been without water for longer than was safe. "How long have you been out here?" "Since yesterday evening, maybe longer. Time gets strange when you're..." She gestured vaguely at the carved tree, unable to finish the sentence. "When you're what?" "When you're deciding whether the world would be better off without you in it." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He'd had those thoughts himself in the darkest days after losing his partner Marcus to the fever. The isolation of ranch. Life could drive a person to the edge of despair, especially when grief and guilt started whispering lies about worthlessness and deserved suffering. "And what did you decide?" Rose looked up at the carved message above her head. "I decided to let someone else make the choice. If a traveler found me and chose to help despite the warning, I'd take it as a sign to keep going. If no one came..." She shrugged with forced casualness that didn't hide the pain in her eyes. "Well, someone came." Caleb stood slowly, offering her his hand. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Rose stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, as if it represented something far more significant than simple assistance standing up. When she finally took it, her fingers were cold despite the desert heat, and he could feel the tremor of exhaustion running through her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stop." "Running? From what?" The question hung in the air between them like heat shimmer. Rose's grip on his hand tightened, and for a moment he thought she might tell him. Then something closed off in her expression, and she pulled away. "Nothing that won't catch. Up to me eventually, but maybe I can rest for a little while first." Caleb studied her face, noting the intelligence behind the fear, the education in her speech patterns, the quality of her dress despite its current state. Whatever Rose Bennett was running from, it was serious enough to drive a refined woman into the desert with nothing but despair for company. "My ranch isn't much, but it's safe and it's quiet. You can rest there as long as you need." "You'd do that? For a stranger who carved 'Don't save me' into a tree? Especially for someone who carved that into a tree." Caleb moved toward his horse, preparing to help her mount. "Takes a special kind of pain to give up hope like that. And it takes even more courage to accept help when someone offers it anyway." As he helped Rose onto his horse, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a decision that would change everything. The message carved into the oak seemed to watch them as they rode away, its warning echoing in the desert wind like a prophecy he was too stubborn to heed. Caleb's ranch sat in a valley between red rock formations, a modest adobe house surrounded by corrals and outbuildings that spoke of years of careful maintenance. Rose said nothing during the ride, but he felt her tension ease slightly as they approached the peaceful homestead. "Not much to look at," Caleb said, dismounting and helping her down. "But it's home." The house was simple but clean, with thick walls that kept out the desert heat and windows positioned to catch the evening breeze. Rose stood uncertainly in the main room, her hands clasped in front of her like a child unsure of her welcome. "You can have the spare room," Caleb said, gesturing toward a door off the main living area. "Used to be Marcus's room before the fever. Took him. Been empty 2 years now. I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're accepting help when you need it." Caleb moved toward the kitchen. "When's the last time you had a proper meal?" Rose's stomach answered before she could, growling loudly in the quiet house. A flush of embarrassment colored her cheeks. 2 days, maybe 4. I left Tucson in a hurry. Not traveled from or came from, but left in a hurry. Another piece of the puzzle that was Rose Bennett, if that was even her real name. "Sit," Caleb commanded gently, pulling supplies from his pantry. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and cornbread." As he worked, Rose explored the main room with her eyes. The furnishings were sparse but quality made, and books lined shelves near the fireplace. She moved toward them hesitantly. "You read?" Caleb asked, noting her interest. "I used to. Before..." She caught herself. Another piece of information almost revealed and quickly pulled back. "Before what?" "Before my life changed." Rose pulled a volume from the shelf, handling it with the reverence of someone who truly loved books. "Shakespeare. I haven't read this in years. Marcus was the reader, said books kept a man's mind sharp when the nearest neighbor was 20 miles away." Caleb stirred the beans thoughtfully. "You talk like someone with education. Finishing school, maybe?" Rose's hand tightened on the book. "Something like that." The evasion was becoming a pattern. Every question about her past was met with vague responses or subject changes. But there was something in the way she held the book, the careful pronunciation of her words, that suggested more than basic education. You can borrow any book you like while you're here, while I'm here. Rose set the volume back carefully. How long is that likely to be? Long as you need. I told you this is a safe place. Safe from what? You don't even know what I'm running from. Caleb ladled beans into 2 bowls and cut thick slices of cornbread. Don't need to know. Everyone's running from something out here. The smart ones stop running when they find somewhere they can heal. They ate in comfortable silence, the first real meal Rose had enjoyed in days. Caleb watched her eat with the careful appreciation of someone who'd known real hunger, noting the delicate way she handled her spoon despite her obvious familiarity with fine things. "Can I ask you something?" Rose said as they finished. "Course. Why did you ignore the warning? The tree, I mean. Most people would have ridden on." Caleb considered the question while cleaning their bowls. "I had a partner once, good man named Marcus. When the fever hit him, he'd begged me to just let him die, said he was too much trouble, that I should save myself the effort." He dried his hands slowly. "I ignored him then too, nursed him through 2 weeks of hell before the fever finally won. But those 2 weeks mattered. They meant he didn't die alone, thinking nobody cared. But he died anyway. Yeah, he died anyway. But he died knowing someone fought for him, even when he'd given up fighting for himself." Caleb met her eyes directly. "Sometimes the fight isn't about winning. Sometimes it's just about not being alone in the dark." Rose's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. What if the person you're fighting for doesn't deserve it? What if they've done things that can't be forgiven? That's not your call to make. Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you accept when it's offered. You don't understand. You don't know what I've done. Then tell me. The simple invitation hung between them. Rose stared at Caleb's weathered face, seeing patience and genuine concern instead of judgment or curiosity. For a moment she seemed ready to speak. Then horses' hooves sounded outside, followed by men's voices calling out, "Thorn! You in there?" Rose went white as desert bone. "They found me!" "Who found you?" "The men from Tucson. I have to go. I have to run again." She was already moving toward the back of the house, panic driving her movements. "Wait." Caleb caught her arm gently but firmly. "Let me see who it is first. Could be neighbors, could be nothing to do with you. You don't understand. These men, they'll hurt you just for helping me. They'll..." "Rose." Caleb's voice was calm and steady. "Trust me. Whatever you're afraid of, we'll face it together. You don't have to run anymore." But Rose was already shaking her head, backing toward the rear door. "I should never have let you help me. The warning was there for a reason, Caleb. Some people bring nothing but trouble to those who care about them." The voices outside grew closer, and Rose's fear was so palpable it seemed to fill the room like smoke. Whatever she was running from, whoever she really was, the terror in her eyes was absolutely genuine. "Stay here," Caleb said firmly. "Let me handle this." "You can't handle this. You don't know who these people are or what they're capable of." "Then maybe it's time you told me." Caleb stepped onto his porch to find 3 men dismounting from dusty horses. Their expensive suits looked out of place in the desert, and their polished boots had never seen honest ranch work. The leader, a thin man with cold eyes and a silver watch chain, approached with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. "Mr. Thorn, I'm Detective Harrison from Tucson. We are looking for a woman who may have passed through this area. Dangerous criminal, wanted for murder." "Murder." Caleb kept his voice neutral. His hands relaxed at his sides. What's she supposed to have done? "Killed her husband 3 days ago. Wealthy businessman named Charles Whitmore. Shot him in cold blood and fled with a considerable sum of money." Harrison pulled out a photograph. "Goes by Rose Bennett now. But her real name is Catherine Whitmore." Caleb studied the photograph. It was definitely Rose, but dressed in expensive clothes, her hair styled elaborately. She looked like a different person entirely. confident and refined in a way that spoke of privilege and social standing. Haven't seen anyone matching that description? Caleb lied smoothly. This is pretty isolated country. Don't get many visitors. Mind. If we search your property, we have reason to believe she's in this area. You got a warrant for that search, detective? Harrison's smile was thin and predatory. We're pursuing a dangerous fugitive, Mr. Thorne. I'd hate to think you were harboring a killer out of misplaced sympathy. Inside the house, Rose pressed herself against the wall next to the window, listening to every word. Catherine Whitmore. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 3 days, and it hit her like a physical blow. The woman who had been Catherine was dead, killed in that Tucson mansion along with Charles. Only Rose remained, and she was dying too, piece by piece. I'm not harboring anyone, Caleb said firmly, and unless you've got legal authority to search my land, I'll have to ask you to move along. Mr. Thorne, this woman is extremely dangerous. She seduced Charles Whitmore, married him for his money, then murdered him when he discovered her plan to steal from his business accounts. Harrison's voice carried the practiced cadence of a man spinning a familiar story. She's a calculating killer who'll use any man foolish enough to trust her. That's so? And you've got witnesses to this murder? A pause. The evidence is clear. She was found over the body with the murder weapon. Found by who? Another pause. Longer this time. By business associates who came to check on Mr. Whitmore when he missed an important meeting. Rose closed her eyes, remembering that awful morning. Charles lying in his study, blood pooling beneath his head, the gun in her trembling hands as she knelt beside his body. The men bursting in, their shocked expressions quickly shifting to something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Funny thing about that, Caleb said conversationally. Most wives who kill their husbands don't stick around to be caught red-handed. They run first, establish alibis. This Catherine of yours sounds more like someone who walked in on a crime than someone who committed one. Harrison's facade cracked slightly. Mr. Thorne, I don't think you understand the severity of... I understand plenty. I understand that 3 well-dressed men rode 20 miles into the desert, chasing a woman who was supposedly seen in this area. I understand that you're asking to search private property without a warrant, and I understand that your story has more holes than a prairie dog town. The tension on the porch ratcheted higher. Harrison's 2 companions moved closer, their coats falling open to reveal shoulder holsters, but Caleb didn't flinch. 15 years of ranch life had taught him to read dangerous men, and these 3 were more politician than gunfighter. Perhaps we should return with proper authority, Harrison said finally. But Mr. Thorne, if you are hiding this woman, you're making a serious mistake. She'll turn on you the moment it suits her purpose. If I see any dangerous fugitives, I'll be sure to let the proper authorities know. The men remounted and rode away, but their departure felt more like a tactical retreat than a true leaving. Rose sagged against the wall, her whole body shaking with relief and terror combined. They'll be back, she said when Caleb returned to the house, with more men, with warrants, with whatever they need to take me. Maybe. But first, I think you owe me some truth. Are you Catherine Whitmore? Rose looked at him with eyes full of pain and resignation. I was. For 18 months, I was Catherine Whitmore, wife to one of the wealthiest men in Arizona Territory. Before that, I was Rose Sinclair, school teacher from Kansas. Before that, she shrugged helplessly. I've been so many people, I sometimes forget who I really am. Did you kill your husband? No, but I might as well have. If I hadn't married him, if I hadn't been there that morning, Charles would still be alive. Tears tracked down her cheeks. He died because of me, Caleb. Because of who I am and what I know. What do you know? Rose met his eyes directly for the first time since the confrontation. I know that my husband discovered his business partners were stealing from him. I know he was going to expose them, and I know they killed him to keep him quiet. Then why? Are they chasing you instead of covering their tracks? Because Charles told me everything before he died. Names, amounts, account numbers, all of it. I'm the only witness who can destroy them. Rose's voice grew stronger as she spoke the truth at last. They can't let me live, Caleb, and they can't let anyone who helps me live either. They came back at dawn with 6 men instead of 3. But Caleb was ready. He'd spent the night preparing, and Catherine had spent it writing everything she remembered about Charles's discoveries. Names, dates, stolen amounts, all of it documented in her careful schoolteacher's handwriting. "They're here," Catherine whispered from the window. "I know, and they're not leaving with you." Caleb checked his rifle one last time. "Stay in the back room until I call for you." But Catherine shook her head. "No more hiding. Charles died trying to expose these men. I won't dishonor his memory by cowering while they destroy more lives." Harrison approached the porch with 5 armed men flanking. "Mr. Thorne, we have a warrant now. Hand over Catherine Whitmore and no one gets hurt." "Funny thing about that warrant," Caleb called back, stepping onto his porch with deliberate calm. "I sent a telegram to the territorial marshal yesterday. Turns out there's no Detective Harrison on the Tucson force. Turns out Charles Whitmore reported suspected embezzlement to the authorities 3 days before he died." Harrison's face darkened. "You're making a serious mistake, Thorne." "The only mistake I made was believing your story for even a minute." Caleb's voice carried across the morning air with absolute conviction. "Catherine Whitmore is under the protection of the territorial authorities now. Any attempt to harm her will be considered an act of murder. She's a killer. She's a witness. And you're the killers." Catherine appeared in the doorway behind Caleb, no longer the broken woman who'd carved despair into a tree. She stood straight, her voice clear and strong. "My husband discovered that his business partners were stealing from him. Harrison, you and your men killed him when he threatened to expose you. Lies from a desperate woman. Really? Then you won't mind explaining why you're not wearing a badge, why you have no official paperwork, and why you're threatening an honest rancher." Catherine pulled out the papers she'd written. "Charles documented everything, every theft, every forged signature, every account you thought he didn't know about." Harrison's composure finally cracked. "Give me those papers or everyone here dies." "Too late for that," Caleb smiled grimly. "Copies are already on their way to Tucson with the real law enforcement. Should arrive about the same time you're explaining to a territorial judge why you murdered Charles Whitmore." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. 6 armed men against a rancher and a schoolteacher, but the balance of power had shifted completely. Harrison and his men were no longer hunters. They were trapped animals facing exposure and execution. "You think you've won?" Harrison snarled. "You think anyone will believe a killer and a nobody rancher over respected businessmen? I think the stolen money in your accounts will speak louder than any testimony," Catherine replied calmly. "Charles was very thorough in his record keeping." The sound of approaching horses made everyone turn. A dust cloud on the horizon resolved into 8 riders wearing territorial marshal badges, led by a weathered man with silver hair and steady eyes. "Marshal Bradley," Caleb called out in greeting. "Right on time." Harrison made one last desperate play, drawing his gun and pointing it at Catherine. "Drop your weapons or she dies." But Catherine didn't flinch. 3 days ago, she would have welcomed the bullet. Now standing beside a man who'd chosen to save her despite every warning, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever, the will to fight for her own life. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "Pull that trigger and you'll hang for 2 murders instead of 1. Charles died believing in justice. I'll die the same way if I have to." The marshal's men surrounded Harrison's group with practiced efficiency. "Lower your weapons. You're all under arrest for the murder of Charles Whitmore and conspiracy to commit fraud." Harrison's gun wavered, then dropped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. As the marshals led the killers away, Catherine turned to Caleb with tears streaming down her face. "You saved me. Even after you knew the truth, even knowing the danger, you saved me. You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to remember who you were. Who am I now? Catherine Whitmore is a widow. Rose Bennett was a lie. I don't know. And who's left? Caleb considered this seriously. Maybe you're someone new, someone who's been through hell and came out stronger, someone who chose to fight when fighting mattered most. Catherine looked out at the desert where her journey had begun, then at the man who'd refused to let her give up on herself. I carved "Don't save me" into that tree because I thought I was beyond saving. I was wrong about being beyond saving, about needing to be saved by someone else. She smiled through her tears. Turns out, the saving happened when I decided to stop running and start fighting back. That evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Catherine made a decision. I want to stay, Caleb, not because I'm running or hiding, but because this feels like home. You sure? You could go anywhere now, be anyone you want. That's exactly why I want to stay. For the first time in years, I know exactly who I am. I'm Catherine Sinclair, and I'm home. The carved tree still stood in the desert, its desperate message now a monument to despair overcome. But Catherine no longer needed its warning. She'd learned that sometimes the people worth saving are the ones who carve "Don't save me" into trees. And sometimes salvation comes not from being rescued, but from finding the courage to rescue yourself. What an incredible transformation. Catherine's journey from despair to courage shows us that sometimes our darkest moments can become the foundation for our greatest strength. If this story inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like Catherine's remind us that everyone deserves a second chance, and that true courage often comes when we stop running from our problems and start facing them head-on. What did you think of Catherine's evolution from victim to fighter? How important was Caleb's unwavering support in her transformation? And what does this story teach us about the difference between being saved and saving ourselves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our other powerful stories about redemption, courage, and the strength we find when we refuse to give up. Next week, we'll bring you another incredible tale of triumph over seemingly impossible odds. Like this video if Catherine's journey moved you, and remember that sometimes the warning "Don't save me" is really a cry for help from someone who's forgotten they're worth saving. See you in the next story, where ordinary people discover extraordinary courage.